Again, a warm word of welcome to all who are visiting with us today. We welcome you. We're delighted to have you here at the Cathedral, the mother church of our diocese. And we're glad to welcome so many visitors on this Mission Sunday. Have you ever prayed, Lord, I want you to give me whatever it is I ask? Perhaps we're not that blunt, but I think occasionally our requests are similar to the request of James and John in the Gospel today. Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Certainly the Lord wants us to express what we need, but sometimes it's good for us to pause for a minute and truly consider what we are asking for. In today's gospel, the apostles and Jesus are on the way to Jerusalem. And in the verses preceding today's gospel, Jesus told the apostles what awaited him in Jerusalem. He would be condemned, mocked, spit upon, scourged, and killed. And in 3 days he will rise up. I don't think James and John really thought about what they were going to ask Jesus. They asked for seats of honor when Jesus was in his glory. Grant that in your glory we may sit one on your right hand and one on your left. But I think James and John, like many of us, had selective hearing. What they heard was, and in 3 days, rise. But they ignored or missed or forgot about what came before the rising. They wanted to share in Jesus' glory, but do not appear to understand that there's going to be a lot of suffering too. And this incident then becomes a teachable moment for Jesus. He used it to explain authority in terms of service. Unlike the rulers of the day who lorded over their people and make their authority felt, Jesus proposes another way. Whoever wishes to be first among you must be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Centuries earlier, the prophet Isaiah talked about the suffering servant who would give his life for his people. The first reading proclaimed draws our attention to this suffering servant who would give his life as an offering for sin and through his suffering justify many. The suffering servant was one of the images for the long-awaited Messiah. There were others. A powerful king, for instance, who would deliver Israel from her enemies and restore Israel's glory and splendor. This was a prominent expectation at the time of Jesus' ministry. His reference to the suffering servant dispelled this notion and set the apostles on the right course. Although Jesus could heal any illness, drive out any demon, command the powers of nature, he chose to be cursed in infirmity. He came to conquer us not by force of arms, but by the power of love and forgiveness. It was difficult for the apostles, and it's difficult for us also to understand how radical Jesus' teaching about powerlessness is. How much energy do we spend trying to be noticed by others? How much attention do we give to the attractive, powerful, and charismatic personalities? On the other hand, how often do we overlook those who are in need and could use a kind word? Do we have the attitude of the Samaritan who acted as a neighbor to the man along the roadside Or are we like the two who passed by the injured stranger? Jesus made it clear that whatever we do for the least of our brothers and sisters, we do for him. If we neglect the hungry, the thirsty, the sick, and the homebound, we're neglecting Jesus. This should give us pause. To be with Jesus in glory requires that we reach out to our brothers and sisters. We reach out in imitation of Jesus. Carol Houslander, a great British author, English laywoman of the last century, it is part of God's plan for us that Christ shall come to us in everyone. It is in their particular role that we must learn to know him. He may come as a little child, making enormous demands, giving enormous consolation. He may come as a stranger, so that we must give the hospitality to a stranger that we should like to give to Christ. Jesus came among us as one who serves. And as faithful disciples, we can do no less. Today in our cathedral, we have the healthcare professionals. We're delighted to have them here in our cathedral. And we want you to know that with your expertise and countless skills, you continue Jesus' healing ministry of compassion and care for those who are ill and suffering. Your vocation is a precious gift to those that you serve. And at this Mass, we thank God for each of you who care for all of us, who care for our brothers and sisters in need. Your profession calls you to notice the neighbor in need of healing. And that neighbor needs your continued personal attention through respect and compassionate care. Moreover, we need you to accompany family members with clear and honest communication, marked by Christ-like words and actions. At this Mass, in a very special way, we ask God to sustain you in your work and your ministry. May you remain instruments of compassion and comfort and mercy to those whom you serve. Thank you for joining us today at the Lord's table. It's here we find the nourishment we need to serve others in imitation of Jesus, who gave his life for our sake.